The unexpected shock of getting stabbed in the back by the very person whose back you've stood beside and defended instantaneously snaps your trust like a twig, dismantles your sense of safety, and strikes at every nerve of your core belief, creating so much emotional pain that the wound from this blow literally feels as if you physically have been gutted by a knife. And why? There is no question about it. The personal attack of betrayal is universally, across the board, something that is unbearably difficult for anyone to have to endure, overcome, and move on from. However, the repeated betrayal and betrayal trauma experienced at the hand of a manipulative, diabolical liar who simultaneously is sucking the life from your being, as such that takes place when being betrayed by a narcissist, is not only uniquely different in every way than any other form of betrayal, but it is one of the hardest things that a person can endure in this life, and will affect you more deeply and wreak more havoc on your mind, body, and soul than most will ever even begin to imagine. That, no joke, after having firsthand experience and realizing just how drastic and profound of a difference it was, and that despite having a BSN in nursing and psychology, I was just as easily blindly sucked in to their shitstorm of chaos. But it took me nearly 2 decades of being married to Satan before I even started to grasp what in the fuck was actually going on, followed by multiple years of doing research and educating myself more in efforts to quiet the noise from the gazillion unanswered questions going off in my head like bottle rockets, and hoping to find some tips to help me navigate my way around the minefield of booby traps that Satan had strategically set up, as so that the grand finale of brain fuckery and mind-bending torture be like one of those gifts that just keeps on giving. And with all this being about as pleasant as trying to flush a hair you just can't get out of your eye with pepper spray, and then taking a wrecking ball to the skull, that ultimately ignited my passion and dedication in wanting to raise awareness about this insidious abuse and actively pursue my licensure in becoming a certified trauma specialist, because it legitimately and completely such a nightmarish hell. I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy. That, though by no means do I have all of the answers, but what I personally found to be tremendously helpful, and finally be able to stop beating myself up and wondering what in the world my problem was, and not just to be grateful for getting out of this bloody nightmare, or saying to hell with the what ifs and if onlys. It is time to get your life back. Assalamu alaikum, Satan. Hit the road, jackass. Bye, Felicia. Because, well, one would think that after finally getting out of their dungeonous lair of fraud and unfun, you'd be running through the streets, doing all kinds of heel kicks, giving out high fives and fist pumps to every person you crossed paths with, feeling all sorts of giddy like some caged bird set free. But in reality, there wasn't enough energy in my bones or a single thing I could come up with to be giddy about or found heel click worthy over. And all I wanted to do was crawl in a hole and avoid any form of human contact whatsoever. That, as it turns out, there's actually a valid reason as to why the repeated betrayal at the hand of a narcissist has this horrific effect on someone, due to the unique way that these individuals hijack your brain and alter our survival instincts in a way that, rather than protecting us, begin to work against us. That once I learned the mechanics, if you will, in the brain in terms of how it functions, and what it was in particular about certain things that occur during narcissistic abuse, and the specific way that they impact and have an effect on these functions that then contribute in the way that our brain processes the abuse, the repeated betrayal, and how this in turn leads to intrusive thoughts, betrayal blindness, changes in our behaviors, etc. But even more importantly, it allowed me to be able to visualize how it was exactly that by doing certain things, we're legitimately serving a purpose in terms of recovering in the specific way that they had an impact on our brain and how our brain responds to our doing these actions, and thus aided in rewiring the neurological pathways that had become jacked up from the psychological lobotomy that I underwent during my marriage to Satan. And it was a huge relief knowing that there was actually an underlying reason as to why moving on, getting over, or even just the intrusive thoughts about this kind of betrayal was so sucky, and that it wasn't just some personal ailment as to why I could not shake this shit. To which, first and foremost, this reason has absolutely nothing at all, zero, zilch, squat, to do with your being weak, too sensitive, foolish, overdramatic, codependent, nor was it something that you should or could have seen coming or picked up on sooner. Because seriously, if you had known or had this gut-wrenching impression that you were going to be used, taken advantage of, manipulated, and deliberately deceived, whether out of maliciousness in efforts to fill some person's sadistic pleasures, or because they chose to neglect your best interest, even if it wasn't necessarily from a malicious intent. Either way, it doesn't make a difference or matter, because the bottom line is if you had known, you would not have let your guard down, had trust in them, or seen them as someone who provided you with a sense of safety in being around. Ain't no way. And why you wouldn't is largely because our autonomic nervous system that regulates our unconscious functions, including how we detect and respond to threats of danger, is always running 24/7, always there in the backdrop, looking out and listening for verbal and nonverbal cues that could indicate a potential threat to our danger, to which there are three main states that our ANS transitions between according to whether or not our environment is interpreted as being safe, a potential threat, or an imminent or life-threatening danger. And why this is so important to grasp or have a basic understanding of is because straight out of the gate, this gets thrown out of whack when dealing with a narcissist, because they are masters in the way that they are able to mirror and mimic others, which gives this imprint and gets interpreted by our ventral vagal state, which is the safety or baseline state of our ANS. And why truly the love bombing phase of the narcissistic relationship cycle is the most dangerous cycle of them all, because it provides this false sense of belonging to which we are hardwired to seek as connection with others, and this sense of belonging are associated with being vital to our survival. And again, since narcissists have this impeccable ability to mirror and have picked up on just exactly the right things to say and how to come off appearing like they are genuinely attentive, share the same values, interest, beliefs, creating this illusion of having this deep understanding and this impression of familiarity, tricking our ANS to perceiving them as being safe to bond or connect with. But to make matters worse, these connections and bonds are something that typically occur over time. With a narcissist, this is jump-started straight into turbo boost mode due to the intensity of the amount of attention, affection, and the way that they strategically put you up on this pedestal, creating this rapid-fire release of oxytocin or hormones without getting a momentary lapse from being up on this Dr. Feelgood high to even have a chance for it to occur that maybe something seems a little too good to be true here. So in no time flat, these neurochemicals have already reinforced these deeply embedded feelings of trust, safety, and pleasure, creating this extremely intense and powerful emotional and psychological attachment to the narcissist, as well as this cognitive blueprint that this relationship is unique and almost irreplaceable because of the fast and furious way that it transcended, giving it this almost euphoric quality that not only will you now subconsciously cling to even after the narcissist switches in to their devaluation cycle and becomes so dominant that it is going to ultimately override any doubt or concern why you thought you had this mutual and reciprocal relationship or connection that consists of give and take, trust, honesty, loyalty, respect, because that is precisely what the narcissist painted this illusion for and strategically implanted into your psyche to think, to make it feel like you just hit some kind of best friend jackpot, or like the soulmate that you've been searching for your entire life just fell from the sky and into your lap, deliberately deceiving you in order to gain your trust, and easier to then gather necessary information to line their pockets with weapons and ammunition to use later, and things to go off to create contradictions that would enhance and promote self-doubt. Because, well, it's a whole lot easier to gain and maintain control over someone when they are in such a state of confusional mayhem. They don't know up from down, left from right, or truthhood from falsehood. That unfortunately for us, since our brain likes predictability and being able to make sense of the things that are happening to us or going on around us, deeming them as being crucial and vital for our survival, when things don't make sense, it creates cognitive dissonance that over time, once switching into this devaluation stage, their manipulative actions, gaslighting, lies, and the deliberate chipping away at your self-esteem, sense of worth. This happens so subtle and gradual, slowly creating this state of confusional mayhem, distorting your reality and grooming you to become dependent upon them and put their needs far above your own. Bit by bit, it increases your stress levels and you begin walking on eggshells. Self-doubt becomes more enhanced. So this transition into the second state of the ANS, which is the sympathetic state, and where the fight or flight mode of survival is activated, rather than it hitting you like a freight train and flooding you with cortisol and adrenaline, sending you the cue that it might be time to pack yo shit and run the F up out of there, you slowly become hypervigilant, unable to relax or make logical and reasonable decisions, as this state overrides prefrontal cortex, which is the executive part of the brain and gives us the ability to critical think, plan, recognize consequences, and think logically and reasonably, and as such become even more dependent upon the narcissist. So when you finally come to this realization and get the sucker punch in the kidney that comes along with the discovery of being betrayed in the most fundamental ways possible, and that everything about this person and the relationship was built off of nothing but a foundation of lies, fraud, and deceit, which typically is when the ANS would activate the sympathetic state, increasing frustration and anger from being flooded with cortisol and adrenaline, and like a bull in a china closet, start seeking answers, trying to figure out how in the world this person that you trust and thought lie on just deliberately harmed you. But during narcissistic abuse, already having had been in this state for who knows how long, as well as no longer having had access to the ventral vagal state because of the narcissist's erratic behaviors, gaslighting, lies, hot and cold treatments, and daily unleashings of psychological warfare, as well as being trauma bonded and brainwashed by them to believe that you cannot survive on your own or without them, and have isolated you from any other source of support. So not only does it snap your trust like a twig, but it pulls the foundation of safety and security out from underneath of you, sending you flying in a downward spiral of confusion, insecurity, and despair, triggering the same pathways in the brain as physical injury, and why this feels literally like they just stabbed you, throwing you more off kilter, no longer being able to access the ventral vagal state. Your body's resources are already depleted, as the ventral vagal state is what allows the body to relax, restore, and repair, as well as cause your amygdala or fear center to become overactivated due to episodes of narcissistic rage, always walking on eggshell, and never knowing when the shoe is going to drop, which leads to minor triggers, feeling catastrophic. And the prefrontal cortex has been in complete suppression as it gets bypassed whenever in this sympathetic state, and therefore things already feel more chaotic and out of control, as well as all of the chronic stress and heightened levels of cortisol that have steadily been flowing through your system cause our hippocampus to shrink, which is responsible for our memory and learning, making it more difficult to conceptualize or have any kind of coherent narrative about anything. Not only now changing the way that we see them, but it further changes the way that we see ourselves and the world. Rather than starting to go down this rabbit hole of trying to figure out how someone not just trusted, but solely depended on for your survival betrayed you and deceived you, but you start questioning your own judgment to figure out where you went wrong, what you did, why you weren't good enough, and doesn't do you any favors, getting absolutely no closure, explanation, or reasons for anything from the narcissist. They either give you one of their deadly silent treatments, or they resort to projection, deflection, and deterring all blame onto you, like you were the fault of all problems in the relationship, as well as why they treated you like shit, causing you to doubt yourself even more and reinforce these neural pathways that have been created due to all of their gaslighting, projection, and demeaning and dehumanizing remarks that perpetuate these feelings of guilt, shame, and unworthiness. And these pathways deepen our want to try to fix ourselves, thinking that if we could just be better, then the relationship would get resolved. And when these attempts to try to fix things are constantly failing, reinforcing these cycles of hopelessness and fear, and eventually get to this point of emotional collapse, leaving you feeling like you are stuck in a dark box all alone, having no idea how you even got here or where here even is, outside of the fact that you sure the fuck aren't in Kansas anymore, is going to take a whole lot more than a couple of clicks with ruby red slippers to get you back to that place you used to call home, because that place just got blown to smithereens and begins to feel like the whole world is collapsing in around you, where with narcissistic abuse is when you slip into this third state, the dorsal vagal state, to which is where the freeze and fawn survival mode gets triggered. And so in this state, rather than seeing this as a threat, it sees this as a immediate danger to your life. And what makes this even more difficult and dangerous is due to being in this state when this phenomena tends to develop, called betrayal blindness, where we unconsciously begin to minimize, deny, or ignore the betrayal, even when the evidence is clear and right in front of us, which has nothing to do with weakness or willful ignorance, but is completely happening at the unconscious level due to these new neural pathways, as well as these ingrained survival instincts that we have. And this survival mechanism from our brain prioritizing our survival and seeing the narcissist as there being this valuable, irreplaceable relationship from what got implanted into your mind during the love bomb stage, causing disassociation and emotional numbness to avoid processing or having to feel the full scope of this betrayal. Become even more honed in on thinking that the narcissist is going to get better, or that this relationship is going to go back to what it used to, thus creating even more dependency and attachment to the narcissist, despite the fact that they're still out committing and repeating these betrayals. That sadly, the longer you are in these relationships, the tighter these bonds get due to remaining in this consistent loop, and the narcissistic relationship cycle never get any kind of true resolution. A combination of this, as well as emotional blackmail they could be using, threats, they're having control of the finances, your sense of identity and autonomy is stricken, your self-esteem, sense of worth, all having had been tossed into the wood chipper so far back you don't even remember what those were anymore, is why people end up staying in these relationships for years or even decades, no matter how much hope you cling on to, or our unconscious mind tries to ignore the betrayal and instinctively feel like we need to be in these relationships for our survival, does not negate or eliminate the fact that it is still damaging you, mind, body, and soul, like a toxic poison slowly killing you from the inside. And that even after being discarded, or finally getting to that point where you have far surpassed your max capacity point of how much one person's bullshit you can take, the damage is still being done, as well as these intrusive thoughts, these feelings of guilt, shame that consume and plague one's mind, and can for years and years to come. And why understanding these different states and what exactly it is about doing certain things during the recovery stage that can rewire these pathways that have formed as a result of the abuse and repeated betrayal, and why no contact is so important. Because once you get this distance and they aren't breathing down your neck, fully and unconditionally accept the reality of it all without trying to deny, minimize, or fight against it. Also facing the emotional pain without judgment or resistance, or excusing the abuse or their behaviors due to their having a personality disorder or something that happened to them during their childhood or whatever. Because regardless, that does not give somebody the right to treat you with such disregard and inhumanity, nor does it make it okay. Abuse is abuse is abuse. And that there is nothing that you or anybody else is going to do to fix them, because you did not create the monster, and it is not your job to tame the beast, because you can't. But by being able to let go and knowing that it is okay to let go, because there is nothing that you could have done differently to get any different outcome, and that you can't save them, you can't help them, you can't fix them, but you can absolutely save yourself. You can rewire the pathways that these fuckers deliberately manipulated, used, and created in your head so that they could use you, and not feeling the need to show compassion, pity, or even find forgiveness. Because in order for compassion, kindness, love, empathy, or any of it to work, it requires them to appreciate these things in the first place. And narcissists don't. By not showing them compassion or pity does not make you a monster, but rather it makes you a survivor trying to save your own life. And why surviving narcissistic abuse is truly an act of rebellion, where your survival becomes a form of defiance and refusal to give in to their domination and control, making a choice every day to not let them win, to not give them the victory in taking you out, and an ongoing fight to get back the life that you deserve. the life that they had no right to take from you, and the life that you were born to live. Like that, though, again, isn't something that's going to happen overnight. And you're going to have bumps in the road, and you're going to hit these points where you just want to dig that hole and crawl into it. But every time you wake up and you choose to fight for your freedom, your sanity, and your life, you are defying their control. Every time you take a step forward, even if it is just a baby step, you are reclaiming the power they tried to have over you. If you can endure dealing with one of these demons, you have endured what most people can't even fucking fathom, achieved and overcome, enduring one of the hardest things that a person can endure in this lifetime, and your success rate of getting through it has been a solid 100%. So remember that. And remember that who you are at the core is still in there. Take back the life that you deserve, and that these fuckers had no right to take from you. Save you. Focus on you. Fuck the narcissist.